Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Om Vishnu Par Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Shtotar Shata Shri Srimat His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnu Par Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Shtotar Shata Shri Srimat His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Nitai Gaura Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naran Shaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nasupraya Shudabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. A reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 14, text number 50. Antarbahishcham alab amjanetram Svapuruse chanagrahita rupam Potrastava Shri Lalana Lalamam Drasta Spurat Kundala Mandiranam Antarbahishchamala amjanetram Svapuruse chanagrahita rupam Potrastava Shri Lalana Lalanam Drasta Spurat Kundala Manditanam Antarbahishchamala abjanetram Sapuruse chanagrahita rupam Potrastava Shri Lalana Lalamam Jastas Purat Kundalam Nanditanam. Apachanjanetram Sapuruse Chanugrahita Rupam Postastabhashi Tavalalalanam Drastas Purat Kundala Mandimanam. Grihita Rupam Sri Paranananam Rastas Purat Kundala Manditanam. Vaishnavis. Nishchamala Abjanetram Darupam Suasri Anugramalanam Kundala Mantitanam Antarbahishchamalan Abjanetram Purushe Sanugriheta Rupam Shri Lalalalanam Tastas Purat Kundalam Manditanam Anta within, Bahi without, Cha also, Amalam spotless, Abjanetram lotus eyes, Swapurushaha own devotee, Icha Anugrahita Rupam accepting form according to desire, Potra grandchild, Tava your, Shilalana beautiful goddess of fortune, Lalamam decorated, Drasta will see, Spura Kundala with brilliant earrings, Mandita decorated, Ananam face. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Your grandson will be able to see inside and outside the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose wife is the beautiful goddess of fortune. The Lord can assume the form desired by the devotee, and his face is always beautifully decorated with earrings. Purport. It is predicted herewith that the son of Diti, Prahlad Maharaj, would not only see the personality of God within himself by meditation, but would also be able to see him personally with his eyes. This direct vision is possible only for one who is highly elevated in Krishna consciousness, for the Lord is not possible to see with material eyes. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has multifarious eternal forms such as Krishna, Baladev, Shankarshan, Aniruddha, Pradyumna, Vasudev, Narayana, Rama, Nrsimha, Varaha, and Vamana. And the devotee of the Lord knows all these Vishnu forms. A pure devotee becomes attached to one of the eternal forms of the Lord, and the Lord is pleased to appear before him in the form desired. A devotee does not imagine something whimsical about the form of the Lord, nor does he ever think that the Lord is impersonal and can assume a form desired by the non-devotee. The non-devotee has no idea of the form of the Lord, and thus he cannot think of any one of the above-mentioned forms. But whenever a devotee sees the Lord, he sees him in a most beautifully decorated form, accompanied by his constant companion, the goddess of fortune, who is eternally beautiful. Antarbahishchamala abjanetram svapuruse janagrahita rupam putrastavashi lalalalamam lalalalamam drastas purat kundalamanditanam. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakoya Chakshurun Minitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svam Padantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschachare Shatarine Namo Mahavarannaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gordatwise Namaha Vansha kalpatarumbhischa kripa sindhuvra evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Durgame pate menantasya sakalat paragatir muhur swakripa yastidanena santa sanfavalambanam. In a book written by Srila Sanatana Goswami called the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, he reminds us that in any of our practices of devotional service, it's important for us to remember where we're trying to go with that particular practice. And considering that the Srimad Bhagavatam is one of our most important practices of devotional service, we should really consider what is it that we're trying to do with the Srimad Bhagavatam. So Sanatana Goswami says, Siddhasya lakshanam yatsyat saranam sadhakasya tat. This verse means that the practitioner, the practice, and the goal should all be in alignment with each other. It's not that one can desire something and behave in any way that they want and expect to achieve a desired result. But rather there's a mood, there's a process, and there's an ultimate goal for anything that we're trying to do. And in devotional life, it's very important that we're very clear about where it is we're trying to go in our devotional practices, internally and externally on a missionary level. So what is the goal of the Srimad Bhagavatam? What is it we're trying to achieve by reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, by studying the Srimad Bhagavatam, by praying to the Bhagavatam? That purpose is mentioned in the first 3 verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam, particularly in the 3rd verse where it says, Nigama kalpataru galitam phalam sukamaka amrita bravasamyutam pipata bhagavatam rasamalayam muraho rasika bhuvi bhavukaha. That the Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken by Shukadev Goswami and was received by Vyasadeva, and this is full of the most essential principles of spiritual advancement. And furthermore, it's for those who are completely liberated, and it's meant to be relish. Bhuvika rasika. That it's meant to be relished in a mood of love. It's meant to be relished with devotion. That's the whole purpose of the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's not for acquiring knowledge. It's not for acquiring pious activity. But it's actually for cultivating love for Krishna. So what makes the Bhagavatam unique is that throughout all the Vedic literatures, the different histories of the world are mentioned. But in the Srimad Bhagavatam, only those histories which pertain to this cultivation of rasa is mentioned. So for instance, we see in the pastime of Vritrasura. In other places in the Vedas, King Indra is glorified for becoming victorious in his defeat of Vritrasura. But in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Indra's position is minimized, and Vritrasura is glorified for his prayers. From Uttama Shloka, that he's glorifying the Lord as Uttama Shloka, and that he has 4 prayers which are glorifying his desire for pure devotional service. And throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam, we see different instances of this. For instance, in the Mahabharata, we see Bhishma Dev. He's speaking about many, many moral instructions. But the entire section of Bhishma Dev's prayers within the Srimad Bhagavatam have practically nothing to do with moral instructions. The only reason why we become aware of those moral instructions is because Srila Prabhupada includes them in his purport. So the Srimad Bhagavatam is meant for developing love for Krishna. And that's why we see with the end of this chapter, the glorification of Prahlad Maharaj is being brought out. So the purpose of the Srimad Bhagavatam is anartho pasanam sakshat bhakti yoga madhoksaje lokasya ajanato vidvams chakre satbhava samhitam. Those who are ajanato, those who had no knowledge that this rasa was existing within the Vedic literature, by reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, anartho pasanam sakshat bhakti yoga madhoksaje, all these anarthas will be eradicated from the heart and bhakti will be established. And that bhakti will be able to provide one the means to overcome the bodily conception of life. But in order to study the Srimad Bhagavatam, it says, Dharma prochita kaitavota paramo nirmatsaramam satam. One has to be pure in heart, pure in vision. So what is that purity? Premanjana charita bhakti vilochanena santasta deva hritidesu valyokayanti yam shama sundaram achintya gunasvarupam govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami. Purity means that one's eyes have been rubbed with the salve of love. So if we don't have love, then how are we supposed to approach the Srimad Bhagavatam? Because we see many people in India, they've been approaching the Srimad Bhagavatam for many thousands of years for the purpose of material glorification of themselves, not the glorification of Krishna. What's the difference between our study of the Srimad Bhagavatam, although we may not have love for Krishna, and the study of the Srimad Bhagavatam of others? What is the difference that we have? So Srila Prabhupada, in the introduction of his Srimad Bhagavatam, he spends the majority, about 40 pages worth, of just explaining the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he explains it's because Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the preacher of Srimad Bhagavatam. So if we actually want to study the Srimad Bhagavatam, we have to take shelter of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Prem Purushottama. Whereas Lord Rama is Maryada Purushottama, displaying very moral principles, a very moral example. And Krishna is Leela Purushottama, displaying wonderful pastimes. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Prema Purushottama, Ananda Leelaya Maya Vigrahaya, Himamba Jivya Chavi Sundaraya, Tasmai Maha Prema Rasa Pradaya, Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste. That Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Tasmai Maha Prema Rasa Pradaya. He is giving prema to the world. And with that prema, one is actually able to begin to study the Srimad Bhagavatam. And we see that in Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's own life, he was always studying the Srimad Bhagavatam. When he was living in Puri, he would sit with Gadadhar Pandit near Chakta Parvat at what is now the Toti Gopinath temple, and read Srimad Bhagavatam for hours and hours and hours and hours. And they would simply be reading 2 pastimes over and over and over again. the pastimes of Dhruva Maharaj and the pastimes of Prahlad Maharaj. Now, we just established at the beginning of the class that the practice, the practitioner, and the goal all have to be in alignment with each other. So if Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, if his Ishtadev is Shyamasundar Krishna in Vrindavan, then why is it he's hearing pastimes which one may mistake as being Aishvarya or full of opulence? Why would he be specifically wanting to hear about Prahlad Maharaj and specifically wanting to hear about Dhruva Maharaj? And not just once, not just twice, but the Chaitanya Bhagavat explains that he wanted to hear these pastimes hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. And whatever Gadadhar Pandit would stop reciting those pastimes, he would say, more, more, more. He would want to keep hearing the pastimes of Prahlad Maharaj. So when I was reading this verse, I was thinking about this question. Why is, of all the pastimes that exist within the Srimad Bhagavatam, of the manifold topics that one can discuss within the Srimad Bhagavatam, why is it that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is interested in hearing about Prahlad Maharaj specifically? Why does he want to hear that topic? This is something that we can think about when we're chanting japa. This is something that we can think about when we're studying the Srimad Bhagavatam. We should go deep into the message and actually find the treasures that the Srimad Bhagavatam has. Sometimes we can do a superficial study of the Srimad Bhagavatam, close it and say, oh, that was nice stories. But actually the Srimad Bhagavatam is we're meant to go very, very deep into the message of Srimad Bhagavatam. So why is it Chaitanya Mahaprabhu preferred to hear about Prahlad Maharaj? And simultaneously, while I was asking myself this question, another question arose. Why is it that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, whose Ishtadev is Shyamasundar Krishna in Vrindavan, isn't choosing to reside in Vrindavan but is residing in Puri? Why does he choose to reside in Puri instead of Vrindavan? And in order to answer the first question, we have to understand the second question actually. So in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's a description of when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was going to Vrindavan. And there's these two verses which are very beautiful. It says, Nila chali chila yache prema veshe mon Vrindavana yate pate hoila shataguna. That when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left Puri, when he left Nilachala and was heading towards Vrindavan, his ecstasy was increasing by hundreds and hundreds of times as compared to being in Jagannath Puri. And then it goes on to say, Sahasraguna prema bodhe mathura darshane Lakshaguna prema bade brahmaya bevane. That when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu entered into the city of Mathura, his ecstasy increased by thousands of times. And then furthermore, when he was walking through the forest of Vrindavan, his ecstasy was increasing by hundreds and thousands of times. And he was simply dancing and chanting. And everyone that saw him, they were thinking that they were completely astonished. They were thinking, love of Godhead like this is not an ordinary thing. This is very wonderful. And everyone couldn't help but join in the chanting and dancing of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. People were falling over, paying obeisance. They were completely enchanted and mesmerized by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's ecstatic love when he entered into Vrindavan. So we see that he displayed such a high level of love for Krishna. But why is it that he goes back to Jagannath Puri? Why is it that he leaves Vrindavan? So in the Antya Leela of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, we see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the Gambhira. We see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he's in Jagannath Puri, his ecstasy isn't just increasing by hundreds and thousands of times, but it's actually hitting the limit of Krishna prema. It's hitting the topmost limit. That he's displaying ecstatic symptoms of love of Krishna which are only present within him. His limbs have become shrunken like a turtle. His limbs extend 8 feet despite the fact that his body is already 7 feet. And he's rubbing his face against the wall in the Gambhira, completely losing his mind. But we don't see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu displaying those types of symptoms of love of God in Braj, in Vrindavan. So why is it that he's experiencing such a high level of ecstasy in Puri as compared to Vrindavan? We get a glimpse and we get the answer to this question when we look at the pastimes of Ratha Yatra. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is dancing in front of Lord Jagannath, we get a powerful glimpse into the mood of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and why he's choosing to reside in Jagannath Puri. Why his Ishtadev is Jagannath. Why is Isadeva the Shamasundar Jagannath? When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would go into the Jagannath temple, he didn't see the Jagannath that we're seeing. He would see a three-form, bending form of Lord Jagannath. So why is it that he's experiencing this? So there's this verse that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he's dancing in the Rath Yatra, he recited, Ahushtate nalina namba parada vindam Yogeshvare hridapachintya maganda bodai Samsara kumbha patitara bavlamba lambam Geham jasam api manasyutidyat staranaha. This verse is actually a verse which appears in the Srimad Bhagavatam in the end of the 10th canto when Krishna and Balaram go to Kurukshetra to meet the residents of Vrindavan. And Krishna is actually consoling the residents of Vrindavan, specifically the damsels of Vrindavan. And they're requesting him, please come back to Vrindavan. And Krishna, being in the mood that he is at Kurukshetra, is speaking so much lofty philosophy about how he's existing everywhere, he's existing within the heart. But Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and in this verse, they're thanking him for his instructions, but Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur actually reveals the mood of their thanking him. They're actually responding in a sarcastic way, and they're saying, actually, this philosophical knowledge that you're speaking, Krishna, it's like a scorching rays of the sun, and that they're like chakora birds, which can only subsist on rain clouds. And the only thing that's actually going to satisfy them is to see the moon-like face of Krishna. The chakora bird specifically gets nourishment from being in the moon and getting the rain that's coming from the clouds. So the only thing that's going to satisfy them is seeing Krishna's beautiful face of Vrindavan, wearing a turban with a peacock feather and with a flute in his hand. They're not going to be satisfied seeing him in this form as a king, in this form of opulence. And so Krishna, in Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, Krishna suggests, well, why don't you just come to Vrindavan with me? Why don't you just come to Dwarka with me? And they say it's not possible. So then they start pulling on the chariot and trying to bring Krishna to Vrindavan. This is the Rath Yatra pastime. So why is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu reciting this verse? Because it's the pinnacle of love of Godhead. It's the mood of separation that's being displayed by the residents of Vrindavan, the gopis of Vrindavan, at Kurukshetra. Despite the fact they're with Krishna, Krishna is not existing in the same mood as he's existing in Vrindavan. So although there's union, the separation is even more intense because they're so close yet so far simultaneously. And that anticipation is hitting its climax. So this is why Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is residing in Puri, is because only in Puri can he experience this love of separation. So this mood of Vipralamba that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is experiencing Puri, this is why he's reading about Prahlad Maharaj. Because Prahlad Maharaj, although he has to go through so much tribulation, although he has to go through so much suffering, the pastimes of Prahlad Maharaj give great hope that in due course of time, the Lord will reciprocate with the desire of his devotee. The Lord will bestow benediction on the devotee by making himself present before the devotee and protecting the devotee and satisfying the desires of the devotee. So this anticipation and this hope is what nourishes our love for Krishna. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is reading this verse over and over and over and over again, reading these pastimes of Prahlad Maharaj and Dhruva Maharaj, because it's nourishing this mood of great hope that one day I will attain Krishna. One day I will have Krishna. So this mood that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has, it's the specific gift that he's trying to give to the world. It's beyond on reverence, and it's beyond the statements of what we find practically everywhere else in the Vedas. It's the mood of Vrindavan, which is glorified in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Nayam Sukapo Bhagavan Dehinam Gopika Suktaha Jnaninam Chapma Bhutatmam Yata Bhakti Matam Iha. And this love, this spontaneous devotion, this deep feeling of separation from Krishna beyond all rules and regulations, this is more pleasing to Krishna than any study of the Vedas or any philosophical debates that allow one to attain oneness with Brahman. This is what's most pleasing to Krishna. So how does this relate with us? It relates to us because this is the type of love that's being offered to us, but how do we attain it? The only way to attain it, Rupa Goswami explains, is Krishna Bhakti Bhavatamiti Kriyatam Yati Katopi Labhyate Tataloyam Apimulyam Ekalam Janma Koti Sukritarna Labhyate. The only price is we have to be very eager. And this eagerness is displayed by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu for Krishna, and we should develop this eagerness for the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That's our mood, is that we want to attain the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And this mercy, when it's begged for, when it's prayed for, through the pure chanting of the holy names of Krishna, is attained. And the perfect example of this begging for the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is found in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, in which Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami are approaching Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Ramkeli. And they're approaching him, they're saying, Matulo nashti papatmam nama paradi nakashtanaha parihari pilagja me kim burvi purusotamaha. That there is no one as sinful and fallen as us. And actually, to admit our sinful condition is very shameful. And there's no one who's committed as many offenses as us. So, when we approach the holy name, when we approach the names of Krishna with the goal of attaining Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with the mood of humility, then the result is we attain the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And what does the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu mean? This is also explained in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, in which is explained that the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is characterized in three ways, but what Srila Prabhupada speaks about the most is as advesh, which means that one becomes empowered to spread the Sankirtan movement of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. One becomes empowered to give Krishna consciousness to others. Pranachayar sehu tu prachar. Only one who has life can preach. So one who is chanting the names of Krishna purely, with the right mood and a mood of humility, such as Sanatana and Rupa Goswami, following in the footsteps of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, begging for the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they become empowered to preach the message of the Sankirtan movement fearlessly, just like Prahlad Maharaj did amongst his classmates. Prahlad Maharaj is existing in a classroom with a bunch of children who are raised in demon families. And at any moment, some person could walk in and, break up the Bhagavatam class. But Prahlad Maharaj is fearlessly telling him, Komarao machare pragno, dharman bhagavati anhiha, that don't waste your time. Engage in this process of Bhagavad Bhakti as soon as possible. So, to the degree that we give our lives to the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to the degree that we can become empowered to preach the Sankirtan movement, and that empowerment comes from begging for the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the mood of the 6 Goswamis, to that degree we can become qualified to actually cultivate the devotion that we see in the residents of Vrindavan. Yata yata gora parada vindaye videta bhaktim krita punya rasahi. Tato tato sarpati rikta kaksmat radapudam boja sadamba rasahi. Prabodhananda Saraswati says that to the degree the one has cultivated an abhiman, a realization that I'm a servant of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to that degree one becomes qualified to actually understand the service of Vrindavan. And when we're completely dedicated, when we're completely empowered to spread the Sankirtan movement, we are not existing within the material world. Gaurangera sangi jane nitya siddha kari mane. That we are existing in the association of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's intimate associates. We're existing in the association of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Nitya Siddhas. And Vrindavan Das Thakur explains, Adyapi Kari Lila Kare Gora Roy Kona Kona Bhagyavane Deki Parapoy. That the pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't end with the writing of Chaitanya Bhagavat, didn't end with the writing of Chaitanya Charitamrita. But the pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are taking place right now. And one who can become empowered to preach the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they are existing within those pastimes. And Vrindavan Das Thakur says they're Bhagyavan, they're extremely fortunate. So our only prayer, our only meditation should simply be to see Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu within ourselves and to have the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in our life and have the darshan of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this is why Rupa Goswami begins is Vidagdha Madhava, and Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami begins the Chaitanya Charitamrita with this beautiful verse. Anarpita charim chirat karuna abityana kalo. Samar paitam unanta jwala rasam swabhakti shriyam. Hari pundara sundara duti kadamba sadipitaha. Sada hridaya kandare spuruto va sachinandanaha. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati says that this blessing, that may Sachinandana Gaurahari always be situated in your heart, this blessing can become a prayer when Va becomes Na. So let us take the blessing of Rupa Goswami and pray to have Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu always situated within our heart and within the vision of our eyes. Hare Krishna. So we can, I think I left enough time. It's 8:28. Yes.
Thank you for an incredibly wonderful class. Simple question. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it describes that Lord Chaitanya was requested by his mother, and that was the reason why he was in Jagannath Puri. And also, he didn't leave Vrindavan, he was removed from Vrindavan by Balabhadra, right? Is Bhadrabhadra? Bhadracharya.
Yeah.
Right? So are those like external reasons? You know, just like you have the external reasons for the appearance of Lord Chaitanya, and there's the internal reasons.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's an external reason for his appearance. It's Sachimata told him to go. That's like an external consideration. It's a genuine consideration because Krishna is absolute. Everything that's in and is without. So all the considerations are important. It's not that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's external considerations aren't important and his internal considerations are the only one that's important. But the Chaitanya Charitamrita explains that Mahaprabhu's internal purpose for appearing was to experience the glory of Srimati Radharani's love, the beauty that she sees in Krishna, and the sweetness that only she can experience in relationship to Krishna. So Mahaprabhu's residence in Jagannath Puri is functioning specifically for that purpose. Because in Vrindavan, he's not able to experience this element of Radharani's love, which is Vipralamba. Because the abode of Vrindavan is Milanadam. It's a place of union. It's a place of Madhurya. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati explains that Jagannath Puri is Vipralamba Setra. It's a place of separation. And the whole Dham of Jagannath Puri is a very deep tattva that is seminars and seminars and seminars worth of discussion. But that's just a quick answer.
One more question? You know, okay.
Oh, please.
Okay. So we're instructed to follow in the footsteps of the 12 Mahajans, you know, Mahajani and Ikatapa. But it seems like, you know, I was reminded this morning, some of these Mahajans are not Krishna Bhaktas. But from the sounds of what we heard this morning, Prahlad Maharaj is not a Krishna Bhakta. He's seeing Narayan and his eternal consort, Lakshmi. And that's because he wants to, because it was described how Krishna's reciprocating. He shows you the form. And Bhishma Dev also, he was a Narayan Bhakta. So how is it that they're Mahajans? Because, you know...
Because, like I was explaining in the class, why is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu choosing to hear about Prahlad Maharaj? It's because that determination, that the intensity of what Prahlad Maharaj had to go through, this actually nourishes one's love for Krishna. To hear just any element of different types of devotion from different devotees is praiseworthy. Narottam Das Thakur in his Prema Bhakti Chandrika glorifies Hanuman for Nishkinshana Bhakti, or Naishtika Bhakti, just fixity and service. So it's not that because someone isn't cultivating love for Shyamasundar Krishna that there's not something to be learned from him. The whole Brihat Bhagavatamrita is actually about this topic, that Gopakumara is going through the different levels of devotion and experiencing different places, and he's actually appreciating certain elements of it, but he's not quite getting the taste that he wants. So Narada Muni finally instructs him in the presence of Uddhava that what you're looking for is Goloka Vrindavan. It's not in Dwarka, it's not in Ayodhya, it's not in Vaikuntha. What you're looking for is Goloka Vrindavan. But as you go through the Brihat Bhagavatamrita, Gopakumar was appreciating all these different places in different capacities. And there's some bhaktas that just want to stay there. Like when Narada Muni is going through meeting all these different devotees and trying to understand who's the topmost devotee, he meets Hanuman, and When he meets Hanuman, they're glorifying the Pandavas together, and actually they're becoming completely ecstatic and embracing each other, and tears are flowing from their eyes. And Narada Muni takes Hanuman by the hand and says, let's go immediately and meet the Pandavas. And Hanuman's like, yeah. But then Hanuman kind of restrains himself, and he realizes that he needs to stay in Kim Purushaloka because his Ishtadev is there. So there's variety in devotional service, and that's what Srila Prabhupada is talking about in this purport. There's variety, and there's not that we can't learn from the bhaktas that have, a different Lord, because ultimately they're all Krishna. And
can I ask one more thing? Okay, so it's not that we can't learn from those devotees like Hanuman and the Pandavas and Prahlad Maharaj. Do they have something yet to learn?
The thing is in the Brihat Bhagavatamrita, it seems that even if there is something for them to learn, they're satisfied with their service. Like Hanuman, he didn't want to go any higher. Or Murari Gupta. Murari Gupta was being instructed by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Give up this worship of Lord Ram and start engaging in Krishna bhajan. And Murari Gupta, out of his love for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, says, yes, I'll try to start worshiping Krishna. But he goes home and he's crying in the night because he realizes he actually is thinking, I should just give up my life. What's the value of living? If I can't follow the instruction of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and I can't worship Lord Ram, what's the value of living? So he approaches Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and he says, I'm sorry, I tried, but I can't give up my worship of Lord Ram. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu becomes completely ecstatic and actually embraces Murari Gupta and says, glorious is that servant who doesn't give up his master, and glorious is that master who doesn't give up his servant, and comes running after the servant and grabs him by the hair to bring him back. So we see examples throughout our Gaudiya Vaishnava literature that if someone's fixed in their Ishtadev, they should stay fixed in that worship. And even if there is something else for them to appreciate, they're satisfied in their service with their particular relationship.
So not everybody here might be a gopi, but we shouldn't be bothered. That shouldn't
bother us. No, I mean we can appreciate what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is giving, and but simultaneously we shouldn't be in too much anxiety about it. Actually, the main thing is that we shouldn't be in too much anxiety about whether we're a gopi or a cowherd boy. The thing that we should be in anxiety about is Chaitanya Radasamuni, Chaitanya Radas, Chaitanya Radasamuni, Dasaranu Das. Our main consideration is, am I a servant of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu right now? And let Chaitanya Mahaprabhu reveal all these things in due course of time. That we shouldn't be in anxiety whether we're a gopi or a cowherd boy. Our main consideration is that we need to be a servant of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu right now. And by doing that, everything will come. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Thank you. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Vancha kalpatriyam bisya kripa sindhu devacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.